So Pulsatilla has a variety of different names. Pulsatilla nigrans is what we call it in Latin, but it's got common names like the past flower, which relates to Easter, isn't it? And the wind flower, which is telling you that it likes windy spots, I guess, or that it's affected by the wind. It's also known most delightfully as the shamefaced maiden.
Shamefaced?
Yes. And when you look at the photograph of Pulsatilla, actually let's hold it out. I'll return it to you, just so we can all be reading off the same page, as it were. It's a nice picture, so you get the idea. It'll come around to you in close up in a minute, but just that we'll get it to you. It's a wonderful colour.
And little, isn't it?
It is indeed. This is just popping out of the ground. This is early flowering. The flowers come out before leaves, really. The leaves are kind of quite minuscule at this stage, and you'll notice that when it comes round, you'll see it easy that it's hairy, which tells you that it's protecting itself against frost. It comes out, but there's still a danger of frosts, and it protects itself in this way from the frosts. Okay, back to you. Thanks. The shamefaced maiden. So, Pulsatilla is a polycrest remedy. What does polycrest mean? Do you remember?
Many hairs.
Many hairs, yeah. And what does that mean for us? Polycrests, many crests.
It's got many applications.
Yeah, absolutely. Many applications. Yeah. Gets used a lot too for that reason. Sulphur's a polycrest. Calcarb is a polycrest. Lycopodium is a polycrest. Rustox and bromine are not polycrest. Arnica is not polycrest. They have more specific, rather more limited application and use. So these are remedies of very wide utility. And we were saying that Pulsatilla.
Pulsatilla, that's
New hybrid.
What a polycrest that would be. Sulphur generates more rubrics in the repertoire than any other remedy, and it's followed very closely by Pulsatilla. So they were well proved and they got lots of symptoms in their repertoire. You keep on seeing. So that's all the more reason to create a picture of them which is distinctive, otherwise you're using them all the time. Wouldn't we? There will be there's a tendency to use polycrests a lot, because they're polycrests, so we need to be as specific about the polycrest's description as we are about Bryonia and Rustox, so that we don't just use them as polycrests. Can you pass it round rather than get stuck in the interior? I'll come back to that in a minute. It's especially the photograph I had nothing to look at, because that's not an interpretation, that's it. Well, that it's like a cow, I know it's kind of delightful, but that's an interpretation. That is the plant.
It is. Are those all the dead bits around it? Or
no, those are autumn leaves.
Yeah.
Well, autumn leaves that have survived the winter.
So it looks very soft.
Yes, it is very soft.
Soft.
Yeah. Soft, yielding. The remedy is made from that.
All of it. The whole thing above ground.
Yeah, you just take that and stuff it in a bottle. Pour on some alcohol. Shake it, keep it, and shake it and keep it, and the juice is what you use to make up the remedy. It doesn't need to be triturated. You can go straight from a mother tincture that's an extraction of the living juices of the plant in alcohol and water.
Misha, let's say that you really need a Pulsatilla, you could recognise it, if someone really needed it, you could recognise it, and there wasn't any remedy anywhere. You take some Pulsatilla flower and you could just go straight for trituration and then dissolving it because you need it straight away.
Yeah, there's only one trouble.
Yeah.
It's very fleshy. So when you grind that up with sugar of milk, it's kind of a messy business. But you could.
Okay.
Just it would be slightly difficult.
Okay.
Okay, so this plant is telling us, just by its habit, that it comes out early, that it protects itself against the frost. The other thing we know about it is that it grows in groups. It's not a solid. Plants usually grow in groups, don't they? But it's very definitely possible. If you come to a meadow with pulsatillas in it, you get groups of pulsatillas, you never get a single one. They're always in groups. And they're often under the shade of things, like just in the border of trees in a meadow, or where there's a stone in a meadow. The stone creates a little pocket of protection, a wee microclimate. Pulsatillas like it there. So they enjoy that kind of protection, because they're vulnerable. And they come out early, well, because other plants don't come out early, that's their environmental niche. They like a sandy soil. If it's a cloggy, say, clay soil, they won't grow there. People who like the doctrine of signatures, like me, make relationships with these things. Sandy soil is a very well-drained soil, isn't it? The water runs straight through. Pulsatilla is suitable for constitutions that are waterlogged. It hates to be waterlogged, it needs to be free-flowing. Pulsatilla people love fresh air and wind and an open environment. They would die in a centrally heated, stuffy room. They would be flinging the windows open. Look at that Pulsatilla. This is no plant on a jungle forest floor. It likes the open.
Which part is it in this country? Or?
You can get pulsatillas here, yes, but it's not very common here. I have seen it grow quite freely in places like Canada and alpine fields in Switzerland. And boy, they're beautiful. Great drifts of them. In April.
That early morning, that sort of winter, spring sun.
Early
isn't
spring,
it?
yeah.
Sort of,
Yeah.
So they generally quite high up.
Yes, yeah, that kind of, they like that kind of environment. Well, not high like arnica or edelweiss,
No.
quite high up. Yeah. And what else can we say about the plant? Well, as you can see from the photograph, at least partly you can see from the photograph, they're wide open. They're not hiding their sexuality. Lots of plants do. They provide all sorts of interesting tracts for the insects that pollinate them to receive the pollen and the nectar in complicated and convoluted ways. But Pulsatilla doesn't do that. It's just wide open. There's a flower that petals like this, and it's saying, "Get me! I'm here. I'm ready to receive." And that is very much the posture of Pulsatilla. That's one of the postures. Actually, they sleep like this. You find Pulsatilla sleeping with hands above head. You see this very often in children.
Children,
Yes. And on their back and flung open like this. And there is a to say vulnerability for Pulsatilla is not exactly it. I think the key word is changeability. They are immensely changeable people, which means that psychologically they change in the way of an April day, if you like to remember it that way. The weather's forever changing and it's unpredictable. You don't know which way they're going to go. That's especially clear in children, especially obvious. And there's also a considerable changeability in physical symptoms because they likewise come and go. One set of symptoms will be replaced by another in a apparently quite random fashion. And those symptoms from which they suffer, because they really do, because they move through them with rapidity, it's easy for adults to say, "Oh, she's just having, or he's having another of his, whatever it may be." And if it's emotional, it's just another emotional turn. Don't worry, just leave them alone for a bit and they'll be fine. Which is actually the worst thing you can do for pulsatillas because they like to be in groups. And they just love sympathy. And they love you to pay attention to them. And they love you to give them cuddles and be near. You know, all that openness. The reverse of nature that develops a closeness. Here we have too much openness, too much. It's almost like they're sucking you for your attention. So for a mother who has many children, a pulsatilla child is a bit of a pest. And for a mother who has many children, the pulsatilla child who needs the most is actually quite likely to get the least, at least from their point of view. It will appear that way. Even if she doles out her attention equally to all her 7 children, Pulsatilla will feel that she hasn't received enough. And you'll notice that I'm gender preference, I'm tending to make her the character rather than a him. Because the stereotype of Pulsatilla, and as they say in the books, in every family with many children, you're likely to find one. After all, he's a polycrest. If you have 12 children, one will be a Pulsatilla at least. That was the idea. She's the one who is going to be. She's stereotyped as having blue eyes and fair complexion and light, maybe even blonde hair, perhaps even ringlets. And she's absolutely irresistible. If you're not Mum. What, like Marilyn Monroe?
Is she? Is that Marilyn or not?
Well, I maybe that was not banned as a stereotype. And so changeable. Moods are changing so rapidly. So she'll be weeping and give her a cuddle and she'll waltz away and be all happiness again. It's very cute and very okay for a little child and really annoying as they get older.
Is it the Queen of Remedies?
Now that's a good way of thinking of her.
Because I've read that itself is the King of Remedies and Pulsatilla is the Queen, is that right?
That sounds good.
Fit?
Yeah. Except always to remember that she could be a he. Pulsatilla doesn't have to be female. It just does have quite a strong relationship to the female psyche, which tends to be more fluidic than the male psyche, so that sort of gets it that way. And also because there's a considerable relationship to the hormonal system. So once women start having periods and there's a changeability there anyway, what about that premenstrual period where everything is so much intensified? In Pulsatilla, that's very amplified then. So at those times, she can become particularly demanding for her husband, for instance, because she wants attention and he may be busy in the office. So her perception will be that people aren't there enough for her. So sometimes little Pulsatilla children are described as emotional sponges. They off you, they suck off you. It's quite unkind really and horrible for them. Well, the other thing I was going to say, because of their changeability, they suffer physical symptoms and the suffering can be as intense as anybody else's. But because they tend to be short-lived, they're not taken very seriously. And also, she has a rather good complexion usually, because there's what is called often a false plethora, which means plethora means too much blood, and therefore a rosy complexion. And rosiness is often what you see. So they look good even though they may be feeling shit. The real key to Pulsatilla, the real centre of it, is this emotional, watery, could be even waterlogged fluidity. It can express in all those discharges for which Pulsatilla is renowned. They're described as mucopurulent, which means mucus and pus, and therefore it will be yellow or green. Green is very typical. There's a lot of that. You know the kids with their green candles? You know the joke about Brussels sprouts and children? No? Well, what is the difference between Brussels sprouts and green slimy snot? That's the question. And the answer is kids like green slimy snot. Because they're forever. And no kids like Brussels sprouts. Anyhow, the green slimy candles is very much a Pulsatilla reaction to things, to getting a cold. They get lots of colds because they're
damp. Damp.
Yes, because they're damp.
And that's a sort of the yang. Is it the yang that's the damp in Chinese medicine? So there's the damp and the femininity and all that.
I always thought damp was a bit more.
Have I got that wrong? Is the feminine? Is it damp feminine?
Yeah. Bit yin.
Yin.
Yeah. But yeah,
It's feminine.
Yeah.
I knew what I meant.
Exactly.
Anyway, exactly that kind of thing. Exactly. And that fluidity, of course, is also in the psyche. So they're fluid that way too, and that makes for a lot of uncertainty at an emotional level. And in order to assuage the uncertainty at an emotional level, they need somebody to be close to and to give them shape and form. So, you know, we were saying they're clingers, they cling. They don't cling because they're scared, they cling because they need love and feel a deficit of it. Or they need, perhaps even more important, everyone needs love. The issue is, more importantly, they need stability. They feel that, you know, the mood changes for them and they're suddenly not okay. And so they need somebody to help them feel okay again. And then as they grow up, if they can't have somebody, they're likely to replace it with a strong thing. If it's not a strong person, it'll be a strong belief. And strong beliefs are provided by religions, by politics, and by various isms. What about vegetarianism? You know, that sort of thing. Strong beliefs about health and disease. So clinging to that is also quite typical, even to the extent of it becoming obsessional. Fixed ideas about things. And you know that openness, that kind of sleeping on your back with your arms open and being sexually open like a flower. There can be a lot of fears around sexuality, and also because your moods are always changing. Actually, who are you going to fancy today, and what is it that they want of you, and how should you respond? They become great uncertainties in Pulsatilla's psyche. I'm making it as though it's always this way. I should say it can be this way. It's often this way. And having a fear of the opposite sex is a strong feature in Pulsatilla. Men who are afraid of women and women who are afraid of men. And so you can get sexual obsession stepping in here as well.
That sort of openness
Too
seems
much
to be,
open.
that seems to be at odds with the fear of the opposite sex, doesn't it? That seems
Well,
to
if
be-
you're too much open, wouldn't you be frightened? Because they'll come and overwhelm you,
Right.
and you lose yourself. And because your mood is changing a lot, you don't know who to be open to, because now it's this and now it's that. And so that makes you vulnerable. And then it's easy to feel scared of that. Pulsatilla has quite a few scares, you know. They're scared of things. Things that come out of the dark, things that are unusual, animal things as well, strong, you know, with dogs. All sorts of things like dark, unknowns, things that can overwhelm you. They easily feel overwhelmed. They're fluidic, soft, yielding, changeable kind of personalities. So when giving you the homework idea of a central theme for Pulsatilla, I wrote feels alone and always changeable and altering. And key ideas. As for always feeling alone, you know you remember that rubric of being alone in the wilderness. Well, Pulsatilla is in the rubric alone in the world. It's a Pulsatilla feeling. It's not a wilderness, it's the world.
Surrounding herself.
She's always surrounding herself with company because her feeling is that she's alone in the world. Very, very lonely feeling, Pulsatilla.
But even in a group, even if she knows she's part of the group,
then that
and
feeling
then
will be
she'll
assuaged,
yeah.
generally speaking.
Better for company than...
Yes, forsaken feeling, alone in the world, ameliorated by company. Especially of, you know, the most important people, but just company in general will assuage it for a while. But of course it never cures it, because that's what drives the need to be with other people, the feeling of aloneness.